fine. No, you're fine. Sure. No. Okay. It looks like most everyone is here. I would remind you that we are now worldwide, okay, on our transmitting worldwide. I don't know how many people worldwide are watching us, but nevertheless, we're transmitting worldwide. We always should start with prayer, and so I had looked at some of the prayers that they had in the Beacons program, and to be very candid, I looked at these prayers, and I thought, no, I think we can do better than that. So let's just go ahead and begin with an extemporaneous prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father in heaven, you sent your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, into the world so that we might come to understand the love the Father has for his creation, the love that the Son of God has for the redemption of all of us, and the empowerment of the Holy Spirit that makes us into the church. Father, we ask you, as we reflect upon the Beacons process, we ask that you open our minds and our hearts to more fully comprehend the situation we have, the methodologies we wish to employ, and always our openness to your grace, so that by your grace we may become and continue to be the church in Cincinnati, in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay. Please come on in. Take a piece of paper or a sheet, if you would, when you come in. Okay. Make yourselves comfortable. I'd like to frame for this afternoon, I'd like to just frame what we're going to be, at least what I intend for us to try to do. I'll give you a brief overview of where we are in the Beacons process. I'll try to answer any questions that you have as we get through the process, and we will come to the end, or come to the end of the things I want to present. But then I have the microphone here, and I can hand it out, and anyone can ask a question they might have at the end. However, when I'm making this presentation, I may say something that you say, I have no idea what he just said, or I think the man is drunk because he's not making any sense to me. And if that should be the case, go ahead and raise your hand and ask a question at that point in time. And people say, oh, Father, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. I'm afraid that I will interrupt your train of thought. Father never caught the train to begin with. Okay? So consequently, ask the question. It won't make it any more difficult than it already is for me. So, okay, how did we get where we are? We know that way back in 1980, a priest from the Archdiocese of Cincinnati made a presentation in the Catholic Telegraph and said that by the year 2020, there would be one priest for every 4 that were back then. And in fact, that came to pass. In 2020, we looked at the numbers, and for example, in my case, I was ordained in 1977. In 1977, there were 402 active priests in the Archdiocese. Now, it didn't count retired priests, didn't count priests who wouldn't be pastors, etc. Just that there were 402 active priests in pastoral ministry. Now, there are around 100, and actually a little fewer than that. So, that was one of the things that began the processes that, if you remember, in the diocese, first we had, in 1980, for the harvest. And then in 1990, we had a similar program, um, and, and then again in the year 2003, we had yet another program. All of these focused on the fact that, in fact, there were fewer priests. But then came COVID. And after COVID, we realized that it wasn't so bad that we had too few priests. It was that we had too few people coming to church. And so since COVID, and I think a lot of that can be credited to the fact that a lot of people got out of the habit of coming to church and took that as an opportunity to say, oh, gee, I'm not going to bother coming anymore. Whatever the cause, the reality is that since then, our numbers, Sunday numbers, precept masses, a precept mass is a mass that counts for Sunday, counts for the precept of the church. The precept masses throughout our archdiocese, throughout the United States of America, and indeed throughout the world, have all taken a big hit. People just don't come to Sunday masses like they did in the past. So now we have a situation where it's not just that we have so many fewer priests than we used to have, but we now have so many buildings that we can't fill on Sunday morning. With all of that, the Archbishop looked at programs that were being done throughout the diocese of the United States. He found this Beacons program. They came and talked to many of the archdiocesan people. I'm on the Finance Council, and I'm on the Council of Deans. And so they came and talked to us, and there was much work to find out whether this would be the program for the archdiocese. But as it turned out, yes, it seemed to be the best of anything we could find. And so the Archbishop made the decision that we would follow the parameters of this Beacons process, and we began the implementation of that. Remember that the first step we took about 12 years ago was that we said, well, we have too few priests, so we'll have one priest pastoring multiple parishes. And we called those pastoral regions. And basically it just meant these were 2 or 3 parishes, sometimes in the north 4 or 5 parishes, that had one pastor. He was pastor of all the individual parishes. You might say, well, what constitutes a parish? In the canon law of the church, now remember, in the church there is local law and there is general law. Just like in the United States, you have the Constitution of the United States, and that is law for the entirety of the country. But then you also will have state laws, but more particularly, you will even have local laws. And so in the microcosm, you will have laws and rules that affect only your area, but then you also have general or universal law. Canon law, the word canon in Latin, you knew I had to get it in here somewhere. Canon means not a big gun, which is 2 N's. C-A-N-N-O-N is a big gun. C-A-N-O-N is the Latin word for list. And so when the church created the universal law of the church, they called it the canon law, the list of laws that are applicable throughout the Catholic Church. And so in canon law, the Archbishop, of course, is the pastor of his diocese. And so the Archbishop is the pastor of this church. He's the pastor of St. Anne Church. He's the pastor of every other church in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. But he can't have Mass. Back when we had individual parishes, we had 213 parishes. Well, the archbishop's good, but there's no way he can do 213 at the same time, okay? Nobody's that fast. And so consequently, he has to name what they used to call, in the early church documents, a little bishop, okay? And so the pastor was the little bishop. In other words, he wasn't really a bishop, but he was the best you could have for that particular parish or area. And so every parish exists in canon law as what's called a juridic person. What's that? A person is someone who has rights. How do you give rights to a building or rights to a grouping of people, a group of people? You give them the title of being a juridic person. So every parish is established under canon law, and the archbishop, of course, is, even though he is the archbishop, and ours, and I should mention this, people say to me, what's the difference between an archbishop and a bishop? The archbishop is like in Ohio, we have 6 dioceses. And the 6 dioceses in Ohio, the one when the church was flourishing in its earliest days in the United States, the largest metropolitan city at the time was Cincinnati. So it became the provincial head of all of the dioceses in the province. So the Bishop of Youngstown is a bishop. The Bishop of Toledo is a bishop. The Bishop of Youngstown, I said Youngstown, of even Cleveland, which is actually, in terms of Catholics, larger than we are now, but back then they were still smaller. Cleveland has a bishop. All 6 dioceses in the state of Ohio have a bishop except for one. And our bishop is the bishop who calls together the other bishops. He doesn't have greater authority than they do, other than the fact that he can call them together. And so our bishop is always, the Bishop of Cincinnati is always called an archbishop. So within the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, we have all of these juridic persons. A parish has rights. It has rights to ownership. It has rights to for it to endure. It has duties, just as a person does. A person has duties. Juridic person has duties. When the Beacons program began to be looked at, the idea was that because now, after COVID, we were having so few people come to church, we had to do 2 things. We had to try to evangelize, and that is to go out and draw new people, either people that used to come to church to come back, or to go out and invite entirely new people to become Catholic, to become part of the Catholic Church in that area, in that parish. So that was one of the things that we had to do, but also we had to look at the efficiency. And we all know that it's very easy to have too many buildings and too few people. And that was what was happening to many of our churches. Because you couldn't fill the church, or even come close to even half fill the church. The church was suffering because it didn't have enough money. It wasn't sustainable. The pastor would find himself, if he had to take 4 or 5 of those parishes, he'd find himself going to 4 or 5 parish council meetings. He'd find himself going to 4 or 5 worship commission meetings. He'd find himself trying to learn who was in what parish and and so it really became the efficiency was lost in the way it was, or the way it is still right now. And so the decision then was for the Archbishop to look at the parishes and to determine which parishes would work together to become one parish. The Archbishop said, everything else that we do in Beacons will be from the ground up. In other words, he will go to the people and ask the people how they would like to do this or how they would like to do that. However, when it came to the determination of who would be paired with who, he took the advice of the experts that had all of the information. He took the advice of experts from other dioceses that had already done this. He took the advice of groups within the diocese, such as the Pastoral Council, pardon me, the Presbyteral Council, the Finance Council, the Council of Deans, pardon me, and we went through all of that. And so the Archbishop said, these will be determined by me without going through a process of, oh, would you like to come with me? Oh, would you like to go with me? Oh, would you like to go with me? He said, that's deadly. All the experts say, don't ever do that. So we're not going to do that. So the Archbishop made a command decision and established the new families of parishes 2 years ago and promulgated them 2 years ago. We don't have anything to say about that. We don't really have anything to say about who we were paired with, because that was the decision of the Archbishop, and the decision already was then that that group would find a way to become one parish. To be very candid, I had been at I have now been at Sacred Heart as pastor for 18 years. And I have been at St. Anne, but not the pastor. I've been the pastor of St. Anne for 12 years, but I've actually been there 13, because for the first year that I took over after Father Mondyke left, went on medical leave, I then came in as the dean, and they said, you know, you're the dean, take care of things. And so that's how the diocese usually does things, is, you know, this is a Friday afternoon, they said, by the way, Sunday you're going to be having Mass at St. Anne to introduce yourself. And I said on the phone, well, okay, well, who's going to have Mass at Sacred Heart? And Bishop Binzer said, oh, I will. And then he said, and then you can work it out after that so that you can go to both. So, so at any rate, I've been at St. Anne and at Sacred Heart for a long period. I have developed a great love for both parishes. And it pained my heart and soul to think that we would have to do some kind of consolidation. Back to canon law. What's the difference between consolidation and merging? Well, consolidation means the suppression of the small fish. If you've got, let's say, 5 parishes, you look at, it's like looking at fish in the fishbowl, and you say, okay, this one is much bigger than these, so this one will probably eat these, and so that'll make me have one big fish. And so consolidation means that the other parishes that aren't the biggest fish will basically become, they will become part of the bigger parish. I really did not want to see that happen to either Sacred Heart or St. Anne. You say, well, now how could that happen to Sacred Heart? Remember, Sacred Heart is not a big parish in the diocese, as our diocese goes. We are a moderately sized parish, an average sized parish, bigger than certainly many, but still smaller than the mega parishes. And it would have been entirely possible if the Archbishop would have chosen differently or not taken the advice of people like myself and others who said, we think Sacred Heart and St. Anne have already been working together really well. You may recall when we had to go out and ask for funds for that major fund drive for the Archdiocese. St. Anne's people came here and were making their phone calls from here, and our people were here as well. At one point, and I may have this a little fuzzy around the edges, but I remember it very well. At one point, the St. Anne people had made all their calls, and they came over to the Sacred Heart people and said, we'll help you make your calls if you want. And so that particular event just was a sign to me from God that this is what's meant to be. And so I think with me as the glue, as the one pastor, I think both parishes, well, I can tell you, both parishes have done better than they've done for a long time financially, and they've done better than they have for a long time in terms of just expanding and bringing in other groups and people. So that's not me, that's you. You know, we're all in this together, and so consequently, it would have pained my heart if the Archbishop would have said, no, St. Anne and Sacred Heart are not going to be going together. And I was delighted to hear that between the two of us, we were big enough to become a pastoral region. Not just a pastoral region, but then to become a family when we moved into the Beacons process. So, what is it then that I have proposed to the diocese? We've been at this now for more than 10 years. I mean, for the last 10 years, we have all known that the ideal is for the two parishes to work closely with each other and ultimately become one administrative unit. And in canon law, there is consolidation, which I explained before. I did not want to see us go to consolidation, because that would have meant one basically consuming the other. And I think that just chases people away. On the other hand, I liked the idea, and I understood it because I know my canon law relatively well, the idea, the concept of a merger. Now, a merger says you've got two entities, they're both functionally capable, they're doing well, and they decide that they're going to go out of business as they are at 11:59 p.m. They're both going to close, and they're going to open as one parish at 12 a.m. 1 minute later. So that legally, the two parishes cease, and immediately the new parish exists. That way, you don't have a confused juridic person, but rather you have the organization of a new juridic person for the two. That's called a merger under canon law. And so that is what I have proposed to the diocese. Now, before proposing that to the diocese, we had our parish council vote on this, and we've also had, I should say, subsequent to it, the finance council for both parishes vote on this. And so I have with me a number of the parish council members would parish council members please stand for just a moment? And Kathy, as staff, would you stand for a moment? So that everybody can see parish council members here. Parish council members, would any of you like to say something before I proceed? Anybody have a comment or anything you want to say?
It's been a hard process. It's been an easy process, but we realize we work together. We've had joint parish council meetings for what, almost 2 years now?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years now, and we've decided we work so well together to do it together. It was a no-brainer. It really was.
Okay.
And Father's done a wonderful job in meetings.
Well, that's great. Well, okay, thank you. So we'll refer to them at any time as we go through this. So that's what is being proposed, is that we've been on this journey now for over 10 years. Beacons, we have been told by the Beacons process that the Archbishop's decision is the two of us will become one parish. Now, when you do that, obviously there are all kinds of questions that come up. Well, what's going to be the church that survives? Well, we are in either an enviable position or an unenviable position, depending upon your perspective. I think it's enviable. That is, we both have churches that are too small for the combined group. We do not have a church big enough. This church holds a little less. If you give every person 27 inches for their posterior, okay? And many of us, and I will admit to it myself, won't fit into the 27 inches, but nevertheless, the diocese says the average parishioner is 27 inches, okay? I think they're counting the children a lot, but nevertheless, that is the fact. So, Bill did an analysis of both St. Anne and Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart, if everybody gets their 27 inches, you can get less than 600 people sitting in this church. Now remember, when it was originally built, it was supposed to seat 1,200. I have the plans from when it was designed and built, and the architect put on it with his seal, seats 1,200. 1,200 what? I don't know. Sardines, but I don't know. Not people. So at any rate, Sacred Heart's Church is too small to be the church for this whole region. St. Anne will hold a little less than 27 inches again. And remember, St. Anne removed some pews when, well, first we lost the choir loft to the air conditioning. Now, I love the air conditioning, don't get me wrong, but I really wish that we would have kind of thought it out better. I wasn't there yet. I really kind of wish they would have thought it out better and not put it inside in the choir loft, because it's really loud. But on the other hand, it really cools the church very nicely, so I don't want it to go away or anything. But what that means, as well as we now have some handicap pews at St. Anne, and with that, we can seat just a tad less than 400 if you give everybody 27 inches. St. Anne isn't big enough. Sacred Heart isn't big enough. Now when they build churches, even when they're not sure, within the last, I would say, 15 years, every church that has been built to hold at least 1,200 people, or at least 1,000. Because obviously in the future, we're going to have fewer priests, and hopefully we're going to have enough people to fill that church, but at least we'll have them spread out enough so there will be the possibility. So, neither of us has a church big enough for the entire congregation, combined congregation. That being the case, I think it's a no-brainer. We need both churches. We have such a diversity between the churches. For the past 10 years, every time that we have had a group penance service, we have had it here at Sacred Heart. Wonder why? Well, we have a confessional there. A tri-room can easily become a confessional back there, a confessional there, a confessional there, and a confessional there. An ideal place to have a whole bunch of priests hearing confessions at the same time. Works much better than St. Anne could ever, because we don't have all those little rooms there at St. Anne. On the other hand, every year when we have the Sunday, Divine Mercy Sunday, and we have the benediction and the chaplet of Divine Mercy, for 10 years now, where have we had it? At St. Anne. Why? Because St. Anne is a traditional style church. It's pretty, and it works great, and it draws people. That's what you want. We have such breadth of variation between the two churches that we're richer for it. And so now, someone said to me, well, Father, 50 years from now, will both of these churches still be standing? And I said, 50 years from now, I won't even be worm food anymore. I'll just be crabgrass, that's left in St. Stephen's Cemetery. So I don't know 50 years from now. I don't even know 45 or 40 years from now. But I do know that for the next 20 years, unless somebody can magically snap their fingers and make space appear, we're going to need both churches for our one parish. And right now, if you look at the weddings for this coming year, the vast majority of those weddings, guess where they are? St. Anne, okay? And yet, when the high school wants to use a church facility for something for Baden or for something for a diocesan program, guess which church they want to use because it's so multifunctional here. So, again, we have the best of both worlds. It's like having a house on the East Coast and the West Coast. They're very different, but nevertheless, you got, maybe right now on the West Coast isn't such a good idea, but, East Coast and West Coast, you've got it covered. Well, in the same way, we're very fortunate. So, the plan that we have submitted to the diocese is one parish. The name of the parish you all got to choose, okay? And it was not the choice that I had suggested. I had suggested the Church of the Hypostatic Union, which I thought was brilliant, but apparently no one else did, so therefore mine went down in flames. But theologically, I still think it's a great name, but it's not gonna work for the practical people because their first expression is what? So, under the name of Immaculate Heart of Mary, we will be one parish with two churches, and that is not out of line with canon law at all. Many parishes have two or more churches. And so we'll have one parish with two churches, one pastor. We know that that's going to be the foreseeable future, is there's going to just be one priest, one parish, two churches, and I believe now, with Ed Choice, two very functional schools. I don't see any need. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So right now, we do not intend in any way to suppress either school. Quite the contrary, we're trying to engage and generate as much revenue for the parents through Ed Choice that they then can choose. And choice is a big deal now, and educational choice is a big deal now, nationally and politically and all that. And so I think there is a smallness and a uniqueness at St. Anne that is just right for certain students and certain families. And I think there is also a commitment to academic excellence that is part and parcel of Sacred Heart, and also a sense of community that is part of Sacred Heart. And so we've got two functional parishes. Leave them alone. Let them exist as they exist right now, and we'll have one parish, one pastor, two churches, and two schools. Both parishes are financially solvent at present. So there's no reason why the two together shouldn't be completely financially solvent if everyone stays. Now, if vast numbers of people go away, well, of course, that's the death knell for any organization or group. But nevertheless, if everybody stays, that's what we believe can happen. One last thing, and then I'll shut up and open it up to questions. You say, okay, well, you've got athletics at both places. What are you going to do? Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so therefore, we have PAC at St. Anne. I don't see any reason why PAC can't continue to do everything that PAC has done in the past. The only fly in the ointment that I see in this is under Ohio law. Under Ohio law, you can have every eleemosynary organization has a right to have games of chance and schemes of chance. You can have schemes of chance, schemes of chance are like rip-offs. I don't call them that here. In Cincinnati, everybody calls them rip-offs. Instant bingo. Instant bingo, as I say. In Cincinnati, everybody calls them rip-offs because that's kind of what they are. But at any rate, those are schemes of chance, and you can do those anytime you want to. When I was at St. Teresa, the bingo lady said, "Father, if you would happen to pass, could I sell instants at your funeral?" And I said, "Sure. What the heck? You know, if it brings people in, you're great, yeah." So that didn't come about, obviously, but nevertheless, the only fly in the ointment is that games of chance are limited to the institution or the organization, that you can't have more than 2 events, and each event cannot go more than 4 consecutive days where you have games of chance. Games of chance would be the spinning wheels, those kinds, the card games, those sorts of things. I have begged the diocese to let me go to Columbus. I know that working through the Catholic Conference of Ohio, I was the finance officer for the diocese. I worked very closely with Tim Luckhaupt, the guy who was then in charge of the Catholic Conference of Ohio. I know we could go to the legislators in Ohio, in Columbus, and say, all we need is a grandfathering, that you allow each existing organization to grandfather 2 opportunities for games of chance, and then both parishes and their athletic associations would be fine. Now, we're going to have to see nobody wants me to do that. I don't know whether they think I'm going to, cause some problem or something. I'm really not. But at any rate, somebody ought to do this to help our parishes as we become one parish in each pastoral region. So, but other than that, I see no reason why PAC can't be what PAC is now and has been. I see absolutely no reason why the boosters here at Sacred Heart cannot be and do what they've done in the past. And again, they'll all have to respond to the pastor, because whoever the pastor is at that point, obviously, he will ultimately be in charge of them. However, they've already been working with me in each case for the past 10 years. So I don't see where that's any kind of a problem. The other issue is, well, under canon law, one of the churches should be designated as the founder or foundational church. And all it means is it doesn't make one that you keep it or one that you don't. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It doesn't say one is better than the other or anything else. It's more simply the focus of what would be the focus within the parish. And honestly, I haven't decided on that yet. And no one is going to even know, because it's a piece of canon law that you do it and then you bury it, and nobody has any idea that it even exists for the next 50 years. So the average person sitting in the pews here at Sacred Heart, or sitting in the pews up the road at St. Anne, in all honesty, even when we become, and I hope as of July 1, one parish, I don't think most people will notice. They may notice that their envelope says Immaculate Heart of Mary of Butler County, but other than that, I don't think they're going to notice. Now, we may have people who say, I am endeared to one church, or I'm endeared to one school. We cannot put ourselves in a situation, for example, if you say, I'm going to give all of my wealth to my kids, and so let's say you got 4 children, and you give all your wealth to your 4 children. And then you say, hey, by the way, kids, mom and dad need to pay the electric bill. And they say, oh, well, not for my money, you don't, And so you don't want to have restricted funds that are permanently restricted. So what I have asked Kathy, with hopefully my advice to do, is to create 4 what I used to like to call, what Bishop Modell and I used to like to call quasi-endowments. Now, if you look in FASB, Financial Accounting Standard Board declarations, there's no such thing as a quasi-endowment. What we meant by quasi-endowment, and I got it, I didn't make it up, I got it from Bishop Modell, who was my mentor, but is a temporarily restricted fund. That's the actual title. A temporarily restricted fund that is designated. And so throughout the year, if somebody comes in and says, I don't want to give to the general Sunday collection because when I give to that, well, it goes to help the school, but it also goes to help the musicians, and it goes to help the maintenance people, and it goes to fix the roof, and it goes to all those things. And I'd like it to go specifically to something. For the first few years of being one parish, we can have temporarily restricted funds so that a person can say, I want to designate mine for that. And it makes it very easy for Kathy to put that into the budget and say, okay, I'm guessing that there's going to be X number of dollars in that by the end of the year, and we can roll that over as part of the budget for the next year, or as part of the budget for that year, for that part, for that thing. And I really think that'll solve the problem. There's always going to be the person who has a particular affection for one thing and really doesn't want to be part of the whole. But I hope that that dissipates over time, and I hope that this is something we do just for maybe 3 or 4 years, and then say, nobody's using it, we don't need it anymore. Those are sort of the main points that I think you'll find in my beautifully written Beacons of Light report. If any of you has insomnia, take one of these. I guarantee you, you will sleep like a baby, okay? So, great alternative use for this is Sominex. It will bring you that. So, Parish Council, anything that I should have mentioned that I didn't? Let me just sum up then with this. The very end of this, you'll see this, I post this at the very end of it. We are not bringing beacons to conclusion. We are coming to the end of the beginning. All we've done is made, if we can become one canonical parish, if we can become one financial parish, legally financial parish, then we've come to the end of the beginning. But in fact, we've only just begun, to quote the Carpenters. We've only just begun because now, then we have to have the directors that we put into place, like Kathy, who is director of executive services for the parish, Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish. And instead of the priest being with his hands in everything and being the one who has to go to a million meetings and is supposed to remember that this one wants pink and this one wants red, rather than the pastor being that, you have the subsidiary person, Kathy, for executive services. Also, we have Jose for evangelization. And we have Bill Durr for real estate and maintenance, building maintenance, building projects. And we have Melody as director of worship. And Melody has already expanded and begun to do other things that are not just quote-unquote music, but are all part of the whole expanded concept of worship. The idea of this is when the new priest comes in, I don't have to say to him, okay, this is how we do it at Immaculate Heart of Mary. Well, it's going to take you probably a year to figure it out. Instead, I can say to him, we operate under the provisions, the organizational structure that we got from Beacons, and you know these organizational structures. You've experienced them in whatever parish you're coming from, and now you should be able to fit right in if you can simply work with your 4 directors and your 2 principals. And it should make the job for the new guy much, much easier than it usually is for when you become a pastor in a new place. I can tell you that it's challenging simply because you don't know how the other guy did it. And if he did it one way and you tend to have a way of doing it a different way, people say, well, now why are you coming in and changing everything? And you're not even intending to change anything. You're just looking at the structure. So if we all follow simple and general parameters of structure, then every priest will be able to walk into another parish and say, well, I know the structure, and I'll get to know the people, and this will work. So we're only at the beginning. I'm sorry, we're only at the end of the beginning. When we become a one single parish with 2 churches, we will only be beginning the whole process of becoming focused on a new model of church. And that is not looking at what did we always do in the past. You build a church, you came up with great programs, and you tried to maintain it. That's what you did. Well, now, maintaining it doesn't do any good because we don't get the people coming to it. So now we have to become evangelical so that we're going out. We're coming together to get smarter, more capable, more inventive, and then we go out with our message so that we can invite back those that have left, and so that we can invite new people who say, wow, that particular parish, it's getting its act together, isn't it? I'd like to be part of that. And so that's the model, that's the idea. And so we're only beginning. And why now? The diocese said to me, we don't think it's a good idea for you to retire until the parish is stable as one new parish. Because otherwise, you ran the process, you did the process the way you did it, the new guy may come in and say, nope, got a better idea, we're going to start fresh and go back to square one. And he said, you'll lose everything that you've gained. And I said, you're right, I agree. But I'm also human, and I know that there are limitations. One limitation is, right now I'm 73. When I leave, if I leave in July, I will be 74. Every priest must retire from being pastor, from administration, at 75. So the most I would have would be another 12 months at the most. And 12 months when we've already been at this for 10 years isn't going to make any difference. I think we are at a place where this can happen, and then the new guy can come in and he can say, wow, what a great place to start, because everything's ready. The engine is running, the car has new tires on it, and all I got to get in and do is drive. Yes?
Who makes the final decision? Like, is it a voting process? Is it our diocese?
Final decision of,
Through the conversion in July.
oh, in July. That would ultimately be the diocese, the archbishop. What we will do, or what I will do, is I will write all this after these meetings, and I have the official vote of parish council, which is technically called pastoral council in canon law. And then also, I think I already have the positive vote from finance, but we'll obviously make sure somebody signs off on that, and we have that sign off for finance, pastoral council, and then I think also worship has voted essentially in the same way. So the archbishop will say, have you consulted with your people? And that's why we're doing what we're doing right now. And so I will give him all that information, and quite candidly, the archbishop's time is limited too, because he's a priest just like I am, and he turned 75 last year, and so he's on borrowed time right now just because Rome hasn't named a successor as yet. But we know that it's time for us to get a new archbishop. That's another reason why I think it's advantageous for us to be settled and ready to go, and we don't need to say, gee, I wonder what's going to happen to us as this new administration comes in or whatever. No. We're done. We're ready. We've got the car built, new tires on it. It's running. All we need to do is drive. So, but to answer your question more directly, who decides? The church has never been and will never be a democracy. So who decides ultimately is the guy who wears the funny hat and carries the stick. And that's the bishop, and that's the way it's always been. Yeah.
Could not the new guy who replaces you still change things?
Well, he could change things. I mean, he may come in and say, boy, why in the world did Tharp put those green plants up by the tabernacle? That's bad. He should put them over there. Or I don't like the processional cross over there. I think it should be over there. Or whatever it might be.
But as far as saying, okay, I want to hold all my masses at St. Anne's, or I want to hold all my masses at Sacred Heart. He could establish them, or could he not?
I think that the likelihood of that happening is so remote that, because what would happen? The people would be angry. People would stop coming to church. His pastor would go belly up financially. His parish, I should say, would go under belly up financially. And guess the thing that everybody who's a pastor, they'll say, oh, I don't worry about money, or I don't whatever, you know. Let me tell you, I was the chief financial officer there at the diocese. And we had some pastors back in the day who really thought they were the bishop, okay? Because nobody bothered them, and whatever they said went, and that's the way it was, and all that. I was, in many cases, 20 years younger than they were. I walked in as the chief financial officer, and they became scared. What's he here for? What I do wrong? One of them even walked up to me one day, and he said, why are you here? And I said, oh, I said, I'm having a wedding. And he said, oh, what did I do wrong? I said, you didn't do anything wrong. I said, I'm here to have a wedding, you know. I'm distantly related to the people. Oh, you're not here as the finance officer. No. So any priest that tells you he doesn't care about the finances, he's not really being candid. He's not being truthful. So that would be suicidal.
But once we're joined, then you can't separate us again, right?
That's right. It's a decision made by the archbishop at that point, and it is unchangeable without doing a whole nother program and process, which they're not going to do that, I guarantee you. Yes, sir.
What's the enrollment in Sacred Heart and St. Anne's schools?
Sacred Heart School is, I believe, 440, and St. Anne's School is, I believe, 185. Okay, well, I think that we try for like between 180, we try for between 180 and 200, but for a while we were at the 200, but we're not quite there now, but maybe.
Can you explain that choice?
Yeah, well, actually Kathy could explain it better than I can, but let me just, because I have a loud mouth, let me try to explain it in generalities, and that is that the state of Ohio, under the present governor and many others, has decided that the movement in education is to give parents choice. And that is because we've had so much of the concern of the imposition in some of the public schools of things like gender modification. And so if your child goes to that school in the second grade, they're confronted by somebody who's going to talk to them about how wonderful it would be if they decided to change genders in second grade. And parents are not allowed to be involved in that, according to the rules that the public schools have engaged, in some of the public schools, not all, depending state to state. And so Ohio said, no, we want to support the parents' choice. We want to support choice in education, and that means the money won't go to the school system, the money will go to the student. And so this allows the state to take the money they would have just, as a handful, sent to the public school system to say, okay, part of that is going to be held back and is going to be given to parents who apply for tuition assistance to go to a private or parochial school. Is that more or less?
And that's a big deal for these two schools.
Oh, I think it's a big deal for every school, every Catholic school in the state of Ohio, to be honest. I mean, this is some...
The archdiocese is doing it. There isn't one school that's not. We all are.
Every school is doing it, yeah.
High schools also?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The amount of tuition they have to pay for the teacher, with the teacher's salaries, whatever, parents could never afford to send their kid to a Catholic school, parochial school.
Right.
Without it. So, environment pretty much very Catholic.
Catholic schools were becoming schools for the wealthy. They were becoming schools for the wealthy. And this changes all of that. This says you as parents have a right for, you know, there is public education, but part of the public concept is we're going to give it to you and let you decide where you want to spend it. Now, politically, there are those who really agree with that. And politically, there are those who really, really disagree with that and think it's the worst thing since Attila the Hun. So, I mean, it's not a happy political situation among any congregation. I guarantee you there's going to be X number of people in Sacred Heart and X number of people in St. Anne. I know some of them who will tell you, oh, that's the most craziest thing they've ever done is ed choice. But the majority of the people with kids in school are going to say, wow, I really like that. So, and politically, that's why the politicians say, yeah, we're for that. They're for that because it is a good idea, but they're also for it because the majority of people will vote for them for that. And that's how our political system works.
It would have been suicide for us not to do it.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Parents get like, they get first choice to kind of come in over.
We still have a screening process, yes, we have a strict screening process.
And the new law, the Ed Choice program allows us to, as parochial schools, to do that because that helps you keep your identity. Yes, sir.
Father, what's this going to cost the parish to set all this up? And money in the budget to do it?
To set all this up. All this.
There's, you know, the different entities involved, whether it's the state, you know, retitling everything.
Oh.
Legal costs.
Yeah, the legal cost will be borne by the archdiocese. Now, all parishes pay cathedraticum, okay? Cathedraticum is the bishop's tax, and it's been there probably since Constantine, since the 4th century. Remember that Constantine was the Roman emperor who made Christianity legal, and when he did, he was a bureaucrat, and so he said, and you Christians need bureaucracy. And thus we have Vatican City and a huge bureaucracy. So the archbishop, the bishop of each diocese has the right to ask for taxes from each parish to help him do the organizational things he needs to do. The restructuring of the titling won't be that big of a deal. They won't actually do that real quickly because of the fact that each parish, or groups of parishes will do it at different times. And even then, basically all you're going to have to do, and I'm not an attorney, but you're basically going to have to go in and simply say everything that is currently titled to Daniel E. Pilarczyk and his successors in office, title, and trust as Archbishop of Cincinnati in trust for whatever it is now changed to the new archbishop. And the new title will be put into his name. And it's not that, remember, every state in the United States handles the Catholic law differently, okay? So if you're in New York, every parish is an incorporated entity. Every parish, the pastor is, the bishop is the president, the pastor is the secretary-treasurer, and the chancellor is the vice president, I think, of every corporation. So you have, if you have 500 parishes, you have 500 corporations. In California and Kentucky and Illinois, you have what's called corporation sole. And basically that is that the whole diocese is one corporation, and the bishop literally owns every book, every stick of wood, everything. For that, in that context, the corporation sole. Here in Ohio, we go back to 1883, Mannix versus Purcell. Hamilton County Court, Archbishop Purcell had a brother who was a priest. His brother thought he was a banker. No one else did, but he did. He thought he was a banker. He took loans from all of the parishes up north and used them to build churches in the south, in the Cincinnati region. There became, in 1883, there was a run on the banks in general across the United States. And the people from the north said, hey, money's getting tight, give me my money. And the guy that thought he was a banker said, well, I can't give you your money because your money's in that church, and that church, and that church, and that church. And they said, oh my gosh, you've stolen our money. So they named Mannix as the conservator. And Mannix then came in and sued the archbishop and basically said, okay, the archbishop, the diocese is in receivership. And so it was a big deal, and the Hamilton County Court finally said the Archbishop does not own the parishes or the buildings in the diocese. He does not own them for himself. He owns them in trust as a trusteeship for that congregation. Hamilton County said that. Mannix didn't like that. They took it to the Ohio Supreme Court in 1888, Mannix versus Elder. And it's very easy to look up in the Ohio Supreme Court, Mannix versus Elder, 1888, and the Ohio Supreme Court made a decision that all Catholic properties, real estate in the state of Ohio, would be functional as a trusteeship for the current archbishop. Now, every time you change archbishops, you would theoretically have to retitle your property. But the way it's titled is Daniel E. Pilarczyk or Dennis M. Schnurr and his successors in office, title, and trust. And so with that verbiage, that, for example, our property here, last time I checked, was still in the name of Archbishop Daniel E. Pilarczyk. And Archbishop Pilarczyk was one of my professors and a great friend, and loved the man dearly, but he is gone. But nevertheless, Archbishop Schnurr owns the property as his successor. So will we ultimately have to change the name, and will that cost some money legally? Yes. How much will that cost? I would say a minimal amount, because you can do it in generalities. And to be very candid, the county doesn't really want to get into a thing where they have to do more than they really need to do. So I would have to say, number one, I can say for certainty, the cost will be borne by the diocese. Now, who funds the diocese? We do, but it'll be borne by the diocese. But we also will have to instruct our people that when they create a will in the future, they want to say, whoever is Archbishop at the time, Archbishop Dennis M. Schnurr and his successors in office, title, and trust as Archbishop of Cincinnati for the congregation of Immaculate Heart of Mary, Butler County, and its successor parishes. And so that would then solve the problem. And now, you could change that in your will as just a codicil, or you could change that in your will by simply an addendum that says, in this case, this is always a successorship. Does that make sense? Yeah.
One other thing, is this preferable to do this now simply as a preemptive strike, basically to get the parish under the rules that we want, and in case we've got a year and a half left here in the parish, that we don't know who we're going to get.
Right.
And that's troubling to a lot of people.
Sure.
So this would be setting some of this, the operation that in discussion.
Yes, there's no question. Part of my method to my madness is we're functioning now. Let's put it together and make it function. And if you got a car and you can drive it, and it's got good tires, and it runs well, and it doesn't take too much gasoline, I guarantee you, if a new guy walks in and says, no, I want a different car, the Archbishop's going to say, drive what I gave you. Okay? I'm serious. That's what the Archbishop's going to say. So, yeah. So, yes, it does. It basically protects all that we've done in the past 10 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. It also, and I don't want to say this too much because it sounds like I'm some Wall Street dealer or something, okay? And I'm not. But part of it also is we don't know how the other pairings will ultimately work. What we don't want to be is if we stuck our feet in the mud and said, well, I'm not going to do this. You know, I'm not going to work with that other parish, or I'm just not going to do it. Then you become basically bait. And you're out there, but you got no organization that is yours and yours and you're sure that you know where you fit into it, now all of a sudden, the other big parishes around, the other big fish around are going to say, well, you know, we could take that part of the territory there, and we could dedicate that to this or dedicate to that. You don't want to be bait. You don't want to be out there and saying, I don't know who is going to bite first. We want to be the ones who are already sitting here saying, not that we're bite-proof, but that we're not out there, we're not looking for anybody else. We know what we're doing, we know how to do it, we got the money to do it, and we're on our way. Kind of like that. Sorry, yes. Go ahead.
As I look around, I see a lot of youth. How do we get the younger parents?
Well, I mean, that's one of the biggest problems that we have is the graying of our priesthood, first of all. I mean, yeah, right here, yeah, look at the gray hair. So, I mean, yes, that is a huge problem. What I think, though, is, see, I'm far more optimistic than a lot of people. I think when push comes to shove, we may not have a church in the future where everybody comes every Sunday anymore, because that's just not what our society has sold our young people on. Our society has been sold on a mindset that says, if I've heard this once, I've heard it 1,000 times. Father, I'm not very religious, but I'm very spiritual. And that I have heard 1,000 times. And that is why people say, I'm very spiritual. I don't need to go to Sunday Mass. I think if we, as a Catholic community, become truly evangelical and show that we got things going on here that make you want to come here, then I think that'll turn around a little bit. Also, we haven't had in this country a major catastrophe politically or even, well, now we have some major things going on in California, and, you know, certainly we've had the North Carolina and things like that. But as far as another country attacking our country, you know, we really haven't had that, even in the Second World War. I mean, yeah, I know Japan was certainly trying on the West Coast, but, you know, that we haven't had that in this country. I don't know what the future holds, obviously, but I would have to say that we're going to be more attractive the more stable we are in an unstable society. And so that's why I think Beacons not only postures us to be viable for the immediate future, I think it positions us to be viable for the long-term future. That's just my perspective on Beacons. Yes, sir.
Just to clarify something, Paul, you talked about the potential flies in the ointment in the state of Ohio. Is that potentially going to affect like our parish festivals, or do you have to do something?
We would still be able to have St. Anne Festival and Sacred Heart Festival. That's two. We would be okay with that. Once a year, you know, we could have each. The problem is neither of our boosters, or, well, neither the PAC at St. Anne or our boosters here really do a lot of games of chance. Mostly it's schemes of chance. But every once in a while they want to have the turtle night, you know, the turtle races, or they want to, whatever it is, that's actually a game of chance, not a scheme of chance. I just hate to see us give up that opportunity, and when it's so easy, I think, to simply go and ask the state. Now, we would go at a time when we can say, hey, you all won, you know, and you won because of us, by the way. And by the way, just could we do this or this or this? I think there is no politician in the world who's going to say, oh no, I don't want to hear about that. I don't want those voters that would be helped by that to hear that that I helped them. No, I wouldn't want to do that. That's not going to happen. You know, that's going to happen. So I think it's an easy thing done. Maybe It's just that they already have their idea, and they've got a way to do it. I just am fearful of losing anything, even though we're not really using it right now. Yeah. Mhm.
We have a very successful church festival.
Mhm.
And reading the bulletin in St. Anne has that problem, finding someone to chair there. If this merger goes through, will the festival here in August be the Sacred Heart Campus Festival, or will it be the Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish Festival?
We are having,
Who decides?
we are having St. Anne Festival.
You are very clear. But who decides where those funds go and how they're used?
Ultimately, it's a budgetary decision, but I would say in the past, the tradition has been that the educational operation has been the primary recipient of most of festival monies. Now, not all, but, and of course, what does that do? It defrays the cost of the parish, so the parish can allocate more money to something else than just for education. But the reality is that I would say the way you get the parents to work the festival is to make it an educational promotional festival. And I think that's what we'll do at Sacred Heart, and that's what we'll do at St. Anne. You know. So, yeah.
How does Sacred Heart and St. Anne, is the name became their identity, like the campus, like Sacred Heart Campus, and where does the Immaculate Heart of Mary come in? How is that going to be promoted or featured?
Well, this will be Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish, Sacred Heart Campus. St. Anne will be Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish, St. Anne Campus. It's not a whole lot different than when you have a university that has Miami University in Oxford, where I came from, and Miami University in Hamilton, and Miami University in Middletown. It's all one university.
Signage then that say, like Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish, Sacred Heart Campus? I'm just thinking if people want to come and ask, they look up Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish, they're not going to find it. So, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, eventually they will if they come to know. It's been printed on the bulletin for all this time and all that. The whole idea of coming together as a whole new parish is that you have a new name. So you wouldn't want to have a name that is the same as the other parish. That would be a consolidation, and you just have the little parishes becoming part of the new big mega parish. So I really do think that a whole new way of doing things, a whole new model of church, a different name. But nevertheless, keeping the name of the church building as that building. But our patron saint for our parish will be the Blessed Mother. Sure. Well, and again, as time goes on, I think that you may come up with different ways of designating it or different ways, but I really don't think that having two worship spaces is in any way all that unusual. When I was at St. Teresa, now this goes back, I became pastor of St. Teresa in Price Hill in 1995. And in 1995, we had Mass in the upstairs church, we had Mass in the downstairs church, and we also had different things going on in the old church. And we came up with different names for them, but people figured it out. So I don't know. I think that the nice thing, I mean, obviously, I still think the hypostatic union would have been something that would have raised eyebrows and made people ask questions, but, you know, that didn't go through, so that's okay. You know, I can survive that. But no, seriously, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, I do think for the time being, saying Immaculate Heart of Mary, Butler County, is really important because Immaculate Heart of Mary in Anderson Township is a big deal, and we do have to differentiate ourselves from our neighbors that way. Yes, sir.
Father, I forgot to ask you before when you get through. I have been approached, somebody asked me if the attendance keeps going down at Sunday masses, are we going to lose another mass?
Well, I hope not. I mean, eventually, yeah, if the numbers would decline, I don't think we're declining right now. Personally, I think we're up higher than we were last year. But it's just that the decline happened with COVID. That's what happened. And so it's kind of like we fell off the cliff at COVID, and now we're climbing back up to the rocky ledge. But I think we're going in the right direction. The problem is that the diocese makes these decisions. I have a letter that I'm halfway through writing right now. Bill did the analysis of these, of how many 27-inch posteriors you can put in each church. And the diocese wrote to me the other day and said, well, we looked at our numbers, and according to our numbers, you've got masses where you got less than half of the seats filled. And I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, that's crazy. No, that's not right. So I said to them, well, when you guys first asked for numbers, you asked for the number that the fire code allowed in that space. And I said, that is people standing next to each other and having enough space to just walk to get out of the building. And I said, that's the number that you wanted, was the certificate of occupancy number. We gave that to you, and now you guys think that's how many people you can put in there. Well, you can't put that many people in there unless they're sardines. And so they said, well, yeah, but we thought that was still a good number because that's the way we thought. Well, so now I've got Bill's analysis. It's going to go back to them, and my suspicion is they will want to eat some crow. And so I don't think we're anywhere close to losing a mass yet. Now, if next year, if we would go to a point where consistently we had less than 50% of the pews filled at a particular mass, yes, then that mass could be in peril because of the fact that regardless of what the pastor says, the bishop is going to say, and our younger priests really, some of them, that's not fair. Not all younger priests, but some of the younger priests have a perspective that you really shouldn't do all those masses in a day, that it's too much for you. And, this is worldwide, so everybody can hear this and see it on the whatever, but back in the day, I was pastor at St. Teresa. I'd been pastor at Our Lady of Loretto Parish in I'd been pastor of Our Lady of Loretto Parish in not Fairfax, but at any rate, on the east side of Cincinnati. Came to St. Teresa. I still had affiliations with St. Ursula Villa School and some of those east side places. And so they came to me and they said, would you do a special mass for a large group of people who are willing to give X number of dollars to go to these different restaurants that we have in line and then to come to your church and you would celebrate Mass for them, and so on and so forth, special Mass? And I said, sure, I can do that special Mass. In the interim, I already had 4 Masses at my parish that day. And in the interim, I got 2 more funerals and 2 more weddings. And so on that particular day, and according to canon law, this makes the priest canonically irregular. That's the term. You become canonically irregular. On that particular time, almost 30 years ago now, I celebrated 9 Masses that day. But that was just because you can't very well say to the person who is deceased, gee, I'm sorry, but you weren't in line right, so you can't do your funeral. Or to a bride at the back of church, oh, gee, I'm sorry, we said you could have your wedding today, but darn, we're just too busy. I'd want a Kevlar vest before I said that. So No, the reality is that that sometimes you have to do what you have to do. So I think that the majority of our priests recognize the realities. They may not like the idea of having that many masses, and I don't think that they're going to ever get to the point where they have 9 masses, anything like that. That only happened once in my 48 years of being a priest. But I'm just simply saying things happen. You know, you have a bunch of funerals all on one day, and you already had weddings scheduled for that day, and you already had said you could have the high school's whatever kind of mass on that day. Well, what do? You can't say no to anybody, so you do the masses. Maybe you're less effective, but hey, you know, there are some times when I just pray, Lord, let me not say anything that's illegal, immoral, or, you know, whatever. So, yes.
You've been talking a lot about the numbers. What are the numbers? How many people are registered at Sacred Heart? How many are registered
At St. Anne?
And in terms of the archdiocese, I know at one point we were among the largest churches. Have we dropped that dramatically that we're no longer?
No. Bigger other
We were up there with
other
like the St. John's and the St. Susanna's and the Immaculate
Right.
Heart of Mary on the east side.
but they've grown.
And
We haven't.
What are the numbers?
The big parishes now are between 5,000 and 6,000 families. Sometimes close to 7,000. The parishes like us are considered middle. We have on paper 2,200, 2,100, 2,100 families at Sacred Heart. On paper, we have 600 families at St. Anne. A lot of those families are widows or widowers, and children are gone. So maybe, and that's true here too at Sacred Heart as well. So you may be talking about a family that's one person. And that happens generationally. Friends of mine I was at St. James in White Oak it was my second parish assignment, and I was there from 1978 to 1983. And they, well, at any rate, at the time, they had like 2,000 families. And they thought they were like one of the top places. But the reality is that they've grown some, but now they're not in the same league as St. Ignatius. And yet St. Ignatius was the little guy back then. So you go through cycles and stages. When I first went to St. James, all the priests who had been there before me said, you'll sure get to know baptisms because you're going to do nothing but baptisms. Baptisms and confirmations and so on. I came there and I had more than 50 weddings a year. My fellow associate, Father King, had more than 50 a year. And the pastor, he only took about 30 a year. Put those together. All we did was weddings. Seems like it. And so, but now, I say, well, at the weddings? Oh, no. Now it's funerals.
Are there, in terms of numbers with the archdiocese, to bring the parishes together, whether it's 5 parishes, 5 previous parishes into one under deacon?
That was the decision the Archbishop made.
Right, but I mean, is there a certain number that they wanted for each, you know?
It's a,
Say we want 3,000 families.
no. There's no.
What's the rhyme or reason to bringing together?
To look at communities, to see demographics, look at communities, and to see commonality of communities. Okay, you can put 2 communities right next to each other, and if the one has a history is totally opposite of the other, So you put Madisonville right next to Hyde Park. Okay? How much does Hyde Park and Madisonville have in with each other? Not a lot. So consequently, you have to look at all those factors, and that's why those guys are considered experts, and that's why they will look at all kinds of demographics and make suggestions. But even then, when they make suggestions, I was at one of the meetings, and I said, you know, actually another priest and I were sitting there, and they said, this parish and this parish are similar demographically, they're similar this and that. They should be together. And we said, guess what's in between them? And they said, what do you mean what's in between them? I said, I-75. Okay? The people are not going to try to cross I-75 to go to church. Oh, we didn't think of that. We didn't see that on the map. So even the experts have to take so many factors in when they're making the decision. No, they have some parishes where we presume we'll always have maybe 2 associate pastors in that parish. We have some parishes that are going to be one priest, one pastor, that's it, one guy. And is that prudent? Well, probably not, but it's what you got to do to service the needs of the people and to the best you can. But no, there's no ideal parish size. There's no ideal parish configuration. You have to look at each place and make the best decision you can. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, no, we are. But we've had the roofers up there about every year since I've been there, and we've said, here's where the leak's coming into the church, but we don't know where the leak is on the roof because, as you know, they travel. And so every year they say, I think we got it. And every year they're wrong. So, and it's not that the roofers are incompetent. Honestly, it's a big building, and the way I found, I was pastor of Our Lady of Loretto Parish. I was the first priest in years who finally figured out why the roof leaked. Now, this was a 100-year-old building, 100-plus-year-old building. 1875 it was built, and I was there in the 1990s, and I was the first one who figured it out. And the only reason I figured it out is I drove down to my church at midnight when it started to pouring rain. I laid up in the attic with rats running around, okay, with a flashlight and looking and seeing where the water was coming in. And it had traveled literally from one side to the other, and it was dripping down into the light bulb. And we had those fishbowl light bulbs or lighting units in our church. And the way I realized that's where it was coming down to that point was that I went in one day and I turned on the light, and the bulb was almost in the water that was cooled in the bottom of the light. And I said, this is not good. And so, but I literally, that's the only way I found it. And when the roofer came and I said, it's over here, here's the problem. And the guy said, well, how do you know? And I said, because I laid up there and I watched it. And he said, I don't know. He said, there were a lot of other pastors here before you, and they never came up with that. And I said, well, they never laid there with the flashlight like I did. But I'm telling you, it's there. So ideally, we need to try to figure out where that's coming in. Right. I think it's still structurally good at this present time, but you're right, it's getting tarnished, or it's getting tainted. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to tell you that I know the solution. That's why we have a director of property and property management, and Bill will have to keep doing but I've never gotten up in the middle of the night and gone up there and tried to figure it out, because quite frankly, I'm a lot older than I was back when I did that before. And yeah, it's a real problem, I agree.
Yeah, there's some architects, and there's some roofing contractors, there's somebody somewhere that can figure out what's wrong.
I agree with you. Hopefully there is. Yeah. Well, no, but I think the point is well taken, is that we need to look at both churches. We need to look at both churches and say there are problems that need to be, you don't want to ever let your car just keep having a problem after another problem. The problem is that it's not neglect in the sense that we haven't been caring about it. We've spent money on it each year, but the problem is finding where the water is coming in and how it's we know where it's traveling. It's traveling to that wall. The question is, how's it getting there? And that's what we haven't found yet. So, but that's again why you have a director of property management, and that director is supposed to be skilled and know the people with the skills. So I think what you do is you just keep doing that. Yeah. And we got similar problems here. We got similar problems here. So, you know, the exterior brick on the outside of this building is interior brick. Well, I mean, but there are lots of things. I would have, when I went to St. Teresa and Price Hill, I wanted to seal the exterior of the church, because the exterior of the church has all of this statuary in every nook and cranny on the exterior of the church, and it was all created by these artisans from Germany who came and built that church in 1962. And the statues were being worn away by the weather. And so I said, we've got to seal that. And so I went to parish council and I said, I want to seal the building. And they laughed at me. And I said, well, you know, we put away a little money now. We weren't operating in the black, put a little money away. And they said, well, how much of the building can you seal? And I said, well, with this year's overage, we can seal one side. It was $80,000 back then. This is 25 years ago. It was $100,000 per side. That was $400,000 just to seal the already deteriorated statuary. So, I mean, every parish in the diocese faces these exact same things. You say, guys, this is a beautiful building. We shouldn't let it deteriorate. You want to try to do everything you can, but obviously there are limits, both to the skill to be able to find where it's coming in, but also then how you address the problem. But that, again, is why it's probably not a good idea to have the priest being the one who's going to make those kinds of investigations, because I don't have any credentials to do that. But, again, that's why you hire the person who has the credentials and the person who then knows how to get the other credentialed persons on board. I think St. Anne, the structure, the building of St. Anne, really needs, and I've suggested this to Bill, really needs building and grounds for both places. In other words, a building and grounds for St. Anne and a building and grounds for Sacred Heart, so that we can look at all the things and prioritize them and say, what's getting hurt and what can we put up with, and how do we prioritize it? You know, kind of like you do in triage with a war. You know, how bad hurt is that soldier? versus how bad hurt is that soldier. So, yes, I agree with you. We need to do something, but we have been doing something, and we've had at least 2 different roofers work on it. At least 2. I don't know. I haven't really kept track of who did what, but so far, yeah. So we do have to prioritize it. You're absolutely right, and it's a bigger issue than. Okay. I know I've gone too long. Any other question? Yes, sir.
Using the festival example from earlier on, have the 2 finance committees come up with any sort of like standardized equation on how to distribute income and cash flow from the festivals to be split between the 2 campuses, building structures, and so on?
I personally would think that if you want to have a festival, you probably want to allocate it primarily to that particular location. So I wouldn't try to percentage whatever it. I would. Yeah, I would think that, again, the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think right now you got 2 buildings and you got 2 schools, I should say, and you got 2 festivals. So that would be the perspective I would look at. But you're right, Finance Council will have a very big task and job over the years to look at those things and say, well, is the school where we need this, or do we need the parking lot fixed? Or, what do we want to do with those festival revenues? Yes.
Once the merger or the
Merger.
Beacons of Light is completed, will we have just one parish council, or will we have 2 plus a combined, or?
We've had just one parish council now for 2 years.
There's members from both parishes on the parish council.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's 5 from Sacred Heart and
I always see representatives from Sacred Heart, and that's why.
We have always met together, it's one meeting, one vote, we're looking at both parishes, and we've done our best to work with Father and look at both St. Anne and Sacred Heart, so that they can maintain their individuality, but yet we can work together as one, and integrate things that we can do here, things that we can do at St. Anne, in order to bring us all together.
I wasn't criticizing, I just always see the name only here.
in the bulletin
If
now.
you look in the bulletin, it tells you which ones are from Sacred Heart, which ones are from St. Anne. At some point, that will change as things progress, and we will be listed as one parish council, but there will still be representatives coming from each entity, because the people at each entity will have a little bit more insight, as opposed to just having, they all come from Sacred Heart, nobody from St. Anne.
Since you list the members, did you list what the meetings are?
There's a second. It's in the
Yes,
bulletin. It's in the calendar bulletin. We'll have it on.
yes, the list of calendar is always in there.
Everybody's talking, now I
It's
think
the first Thursday of every month. They will move back and forth from the St. Anne campus to the Sacred Heart.
it will be in the bulletin. It'll be in the bulletin every look at like it'll be in the bulletin all the time. Just looking at the calendar for parish, it'll be there.
And if you ever have any concerns, feel free to contact
Right.
any of the people on parish council. We do have our email addresses in there.
I've been a long-term member of their parish, and a couple or 3 have been long-term members of both parishes.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what we're gonna be. If you have any questions for anybody, anything, reach out to your parish council member. All our emails are in the bulletin, and we'll be glad to bring it up at our meeting. We have an agenda and stuff like this. So.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I want to say, first of all, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope that you learned something, and I hope that pardon me, and I hope that you can see this as something that's really beneficial and something that the Holy Spirit is driving and directing. Because finally, and the ultimate in the ultimate end of this whole thing, I don't want to be at Sacred Heart, and I don't want to be at St. Anne. I will be at St. Stephen's simply because I have to be, but I want to be in heaven, okay? And that's what we all want. That's the whole point of coming to Mass. That's the whole point of engaging in charitable activities. That's the whole point of prayer, so that we draw closer to the Lord. The question is, how do we use the facilities and the options that we have to do that? And we're only at the beginning of that. This is just the beginning. We're coming to the end of the beginning, but now we get into the meat and potatoes. And that's a journey that'll happen over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. That's right. Oh, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. It's fine, yeah. Oh, I know. I know.
Snow blower that works real well.
I
another time it would rain and it would be bone dry.
Yeah.
But, and they decided that the tile, it was valuable to the slate company that done tile roofs, so they said, hey, we'll put a new roof on with shingles and you give us all this tile. And boy, that,
Yeah, yeah, but again, there's just, it can be the tiniest little thing that does, I've had that with tractors, trying to bring tractors, that I just don't know what, I had it for this place, I had it for this place, I had it for
well, especially when it does it one time, then it won't do it. And then it does.
But, and back to your, the ministry, Tom's gonna be is chair of what's called Love in Action. He can sort of Love in Action. And all of the charitable organizations, both sides, of both big and small. And I said from the outset, I don't want anything to go out of this. I want everything to continue to function just as it is, except that you can expand to say basically a service and say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring altars, obviously I'm going to do the Rotary altar at St. Anne. But you know, the Rotary altar here is going to be different. But on the other hand, some of the things, they, like the shoes and those sorts of things, great things that sure, absolutely. And again, there are good right to life program people who are involved in different groups, right to life groups, in both parishes. And so I don't want to see, I don't want to see either stop. I just want to see them talk to each other so that one says, we're doing this, and the other says, we're doing this, and say, hey, you know what? We ought to help each other so we can do both. That would be my. Right, well, and they'll continue to be, right. And whenever there's a new ministry that we haven't found yet, it'll go into the group. Tom will coordinate it and make sure that it's talking to the other groups. And again, we don't want to step on anybody's toes. We just want to make sure that everybody's wearing the shoes that they want to wear. Well, and part of the problem, I have a very bad case of running off of now.
Well, all those issues you brought up though were so important. And really have to do with like
Sure.
a lot of one call.
Sure.
Without
Well, that's true. But on the other side of the coin also, if we're going to be evangelical, we better round up our ministries and put them all in the same direction,
That's why I was bringing up that.
I'll tell you, who will, Tom Montgomery will be the, is the, what do we call it? There's a, I'm sorry, director. He will be he is the director of Love in Action. And the Love in Action is a blanket for every charitable activity in each and both states. You bet.
Well, if I have 5 grandkids that need to be baptized,
Uh-oh.
can we do that in a mass baptism?
Not really, because it has to be, each parent has to say that they are going to raise the child in the practice of the faith and all that. That's, first step would be have the parents come to my pre-baptism program.
Okay.
And then they can sign up.
Okay.
And then we could have, if we had enough of them, we could have one big baptism.
Okay.
But they got to go through the basics.
Okay. Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
One question, I just want to hear from you, how long is this staying?
Crystal Jewel.
Through July of this year? I wouldn't have been. When I computed contact island, because we knew it was a year and a half.
Right.
And
I heard that.
we made that long.
I heard
We
that, but
understand.
yeah, but I
You deserve it.
You do.
Well,
And said, oh, you know, Father Karsh just telling me that because he doesn't want to have to deal with you. Father Karsh can do anything he wants to, and there's no repercussions. He can do anything he wants to. I said, no, I can't. You're wrong. And he said, no, no, that's what it is. Well, so all the people were like, oh, this is Karsh's plan. So I went to the Archdiocese attorney. This guy just happened to be an attorney. He wasn't an Archdiocese attorney. And I said, he's wrong. And they said, oh, boy, he is. He's really wrong. And so I then went to this supervisor and went back and said, you got to tell him that he's wrong. They said, okay, yeah, then we'll tell him that he shouldn't have said that, that he's wrong. Well, so I'm still the guy who didn't do what they wanted to do when I could have done it.
That's short-sightedness.
But
I'll tell you, my husband and I grew up in Pennsylvania in a church that I went to a long time. The only sermon we ever heard was financial. We need more money, we need more money. So we have been here as long as you, it was before you were here. And we enjoyed every sermon. And I'm glad we had 18 years. Even though I would love for you to stay there, I know at some point I'll have to give you up. There was something by a question was to usher at 10 because we had it, we had kids go here. And so one night he told me, he said, you know, conservatives, there's people that will go, whatever church, father's preacher has the mass at, they'll go to St. Anne, because that's St. Anne, they'll go to Sacred Heart, do that, Sacred Heart. She said, yeah, my wife is one of those people. And it is true. If you would lecture here at 10 o'clock, I would be at St. Anne. You know, I mean, that was.
every priest has
Excellent, yeah,
has
the truth.
sure. Every priest has those that reality. Bishop Liddell told me a great story. I really, of all the priests I've ever had dealings with, Bishop Liddell was the chief financial officer. He taught me so that I could be then take his place because he wanted to be a pastor, didn't want to be downtown. And so Bishop Liddell trained me, but Bishop Liddell was notorious for telling the story that when he was at the cathedral, the phone rang and everybody at the cathedral except him was on a game or a walker or something. And so he always had to answer the phone. And so he doesn't answer the phone. And he comes back and he sat down and he said, what was it? And he said, well, he said the person asked who was having the mass and said, is Father Liddell having the mass at such and such a time? And he said, yeah, he said that was really kind of lifted up by that, you know. And the oldest pastor who was there was back at the table. He was looking back and said, do you think he wanted to come to your mass or avoid it? Carl said, okay, now that's humility. Yes, that's right.
So, given you will attend the mass after you retire, would you stay in that mass? Will you do like one Sunday mass?
Well, probably what I'll do is I'll offer my services initially to the group. It's part of my deanery right now. And it's called C1. I think it's C1. And that includes Eton, Oxford, Oxford, at any rate, those parishes that are kind of north of Oxford. And I know that they only have basically 2 priests to do all of those parishes. And so the priest who's there, and as part of, as I say, my deanery, said, when are you going up? And, you know, I said, well, hopefully in July. And he said, okay, as soon as you get there, call me, you know. So I suspect I'll be probably doing masses in that vicinity because
Actually, that's where we got our,
You moved.
Yeah, we moved, we're in 7 Mile.
okay,
Yeah,
and
so that'll work if I can find out when you do the mass.
yeah, it could well be. It's again, it's right now the diocese is in turmoil because we're in the middle of weekend, and that's enough. It's really hot. But then in addition to that, we have no idea who Rome is going to send us the next time.
Yeah.
who meets